Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. Back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
Welcome everybody to the FPV news with me and it's Blunty. How you doing, Blunty? Good to see you.
Hey Joshua, how's it going?
I'm very good. I got to play a little bit of Elden Ring last night. I know you've been playing Elden Ring since it came out. The live stream
Yes.
was very excited. No, they actually were not. Mostly we're not excited. We're disappointed. But that's news for me. I may play again after the stream. I may
Yeah.
play a little bit more. I'm going to try to actually get into it enough that we can play together.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. If you're down, I don't want to presume. Well, that's my only hesitation about playing with someone else is I don't want to. I feel like if you're carrying me, then I'm missing out on like the fun of the game. So I may just need to solo. I don't know.
I'll beat him up halfway and then you can finish.
It's like one little poke. Yes. Oh man, it's good to be here, and it's good to be here with you as well in the YouTube chat and also here in my Discord server, hanging out with you guys to talk about FPV news. That's what we're gonna go into. If you guys do want to leave a super chat, I will read those at the end of the stream, but we're not gonna. The news is far too important to interrupt for every little super chat. Sorry guys. So feel free to leave them. We'll get them at the end. And thanks also to the patrons in the Discord server. I'll be checking you guys out throughout as well. But we got a lot of topics this week, Blunty. I don't know if you guys, like, look down in the lower left. I make these titles that come in and out, and I made 16 of them when I first set this up, and I thought surely we would never have 16 nudist items in a single week, but we do. We filled it up this week. In fact, we had to kick one out. We'll push it to next week. What are you particularly excited about this week, Blunty?
Well, first off, well, I guess I could shout out the global qualifier track's been chosen, so that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
we'll take a look at that. We'll see the fly through. And AyyyKayyy made that guy. So that's his second year in a row.
The GQ tracks have been getting more and more interesting every year. And that means my position has been getting lower and lower every year. I don't know. I'm looking forward. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm excited to talk about a story we've got early in the session, in the show, which is whether or not you can use servos with ExpressLRS. And someone specifically called me out, which you know I love, saying, claiming that I had said you couldn't. And that's not entirely wrong, and claiming, well, maybe that you can. We'll see. So let's see. What else? What other big stuff we got this week?
I did a podcast roundup. So for the people who like podcasts, they might be excited about that.
Yeah.
I went through
FPV
and tried
podcasts.
I tried to find all the FPV podcasts that are currently on. We're not going to look at some older ones, but some ones that are currently on and updated. So
Nice.
if you find any that I didn't put on there, you can let us know in the chat. We'll add them to our list.
Absolutely. And probably one of the topics that's going to get the most play this month is Quad Mover is back with a sub 250 grams top speed drone. We'll just see how fast you can go while still keeping, the FAA happy, but they don't want you to exceed 100 miles an hour. And then last up, we have a very, very special rant that I hope you will stick around to the end for. We're going to be ranting about UAV tech and his hate for KISS. And you'll just have to wait to see what direction that rant goes. But I bet it will surprise some of you. But let's go ahead and get started with our actual first topic. And normally at the beginning of the news, we would have public service announcements. But we have only one of those today. And it relates to MSP Displayport versus canvas mode.
Yes. So previously we've talked a little bit about canvas mode. So that's like the big hot term. Everybody wants, DJI to use canvas mode.
What's canvas mode?
That sort of thing.
For those who don't know.
So canvas mode basically says, anything you want to put on the screen, like literally whatever pixels you want to draw. You can draw those pixels wherever you want to draw those pixels. And then it gives the flight controller the ability to pass that over a process called Pixel OSD, is how they're the main way that it's implemented in Betaflight, which originally was FreeSky OSD. And so Hydra wrote in to us and to Carl over at HDZero and let him know that basically what they're calling canvas mode is not actually canvas mode because they don't have pixel control of the OSD. Instead, they're basically drawing text elements or data elements essentially in predefined fields. So.
And his beef, if you will, is that HDZero has advertised that they support canvas mode, and he's just pointing out that what they're doing is not canvas mode. They can only display characters, I think. Similar to the difference between a character-based and a graphical OSD. MSP Displayport is what DJI and HDZero do to get the Betaflight OSD on screen, and canvas mode is better. And Dominic Clifton felt really strongly about making that point, to the point where he emailed these to news. These are not private emails that we're sharing. He sent this, copy-pasting from HDZero's manual. And fortunately, Carl was, as usual, super cool about it.
Yep. Basically said 100%. We'll try to get that fixed. And it's not canvas mode. You're right. And then Dominic was like, hey, man, what about supporting canvas mode? Could you do that? Because Canvas API seems like, to be the thing, that we'll all want. We want to have that real drawn on full OSD layer. And basically, he said that it's kind of too limited graphics capability, and it's likely that they wouldn't be able to do it on the current hardware. So they might give it a shot, but it's likely not possible with the current hardware.
And I think I'm super happy about the way this played out because I'm the kind of person who, if you come at me and I feel like you're coming at me super aggressive, I am likely to get defensive, and I have to work. I work on that. I talk about it with my therapist. But in this case, Carl was super cool about it and was like, hey, you're right. Thanks for pointing that out. And then immediately it turned in a positive direction. Whereas like, hey, why don't you support canvas? I mean, objectively, as a user, canvas mode is more capable than MSP Displayport because it lets you draw graphics on screen, and graphics are more versatile than characters. But so hopefully something good will come out of that. And kudos to Carl for having the... I mean, I remember when Dominic Clifton first started getting worked up about this. And I was like, okay, I can see you care a lot about this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And certainly you might have taken that perspective if he came to you in your inbox, and Carl didn't. And so good for Carl, and good for Dominic for pointing it out. Are there any systems that actually do canvas mode today, like real canvas mode?
I'm not. FreeSky has a OSD tool. Like there's a hardware piece that FreeSky makes that allows Pixel OSD. But other than that, that's the only piece of hardware I'm aware of that supports Pixel OSD in any way.
Yeah. Okay. So. Well, maybe HDZero will support canvas mode someday. That would be really cool. Alrighty. Our drama for the week is over. No, it's just beginning.
At the end of the show.
Let's talk about Servos and ExpressLRS. And by the way, guys, there are links in the video description. The show notes are in the video description below the video. So there are links to all the stuff we're talking about and a list of topics as well. If anybody out there at the end of the show wants to keep track of the timestamps, but you're going to need to, I think you're going to need to watch the replay. If you put a comment with timestamps, I will pin it. But okay. Blunty, can you use servos with ExpressLRS?
Yes.
If you flash a custom firmware that makes the receiver output actual PWM signals. No? No, I got it. If you use a Crossfire to PWM decoder.
No.
I mean, yes. But here's what we're tackling today.
Yeah, what if and you could even go one further. You know, you have to flash it when you flash the RX, and that's no longer true as well. So basically, this is just a setting in your Lua that Mr. Brian is going to talk to us about.
Yeah. Oh, this is Captain Bry. Is this literally Captain Bry?
Yeah.
All right, hang on a second. Let's go over here. So this is Captain Bry. He's an ExpressLRS dev. I actually didn't realize that Brian Mayland was Captain Bry. I thought it was like, who's this guy? And he is going to try to run servos off of an ExpressLRS receiver and ExpressLRS aux channel. And hang on, Blunty, I think we've skipped a step here, because why can't you normally just run servos off an ExpressLRS aux channel?
Well, he shows in his video, he actually gives an example of trying to run it off the normal aux channel. So basically, it's too few positions, essentially. So when you try to go, there's not enough resolution on the movement, and you kind of get a jittery movement, essentially.
It's like in the standard switch mode.
Yeah, so he shows that switch mode hybrid is the standard switch mode. So
here's switch mode hybrid, and you can see that it basically is going to 3 positions, or 3-bit channels. That's more than 3 positions. It's 2 to the 3rd.
And then he shows what it would be on a stick. So a stick, does 1,000 positions, essentially.
Right. This is full resolution. But then ExpressLRS has added something called wide switch mode, which gives you your aux channels, I think it's 128 positions.
Correct. 64 or 128 based on telemetry rate, I believe, is how it works. So if you lower the telemetry rate, it can increase the amount of room on those switch channels.
And his point is that amount of resolution in a servo is probably fine for your control surfaces. Certainly for auxiliary control surfaces like flaps, Yeah,
so basically he's saying, you don't need to be worried. Don't need to be stressed about trying to get a 1,000 bits there for your extra spots. You still get 1 through 4 are still going to be 1,000 like always, but you can get those extra aux channels so that you don't have to use PWM or something. You can just use a 128-bit digital. So
well, that's pretty cool. Mickey Witt, you are in the Discord, or Precision FPV. You are in the Discord server, and you are watching the FPV news, and that is the patron-only live chat. That is correct. North 49RC wants to know, is that for channel 5 only or all aux channels? Blunty, it's all aux channels when you have wide servo mode, right?
It's all aux channels except channel 5. Yeah. Channel 5 is an ARM channel. So channel 5 always has 2 positions. So it's going to continue to have 2 positions. Then all the other auxes, aux 2 through aux 8, are then going to be switched to that larger channel mode. Yeah,
in ExpressLRS, channel 5 is always a 2 position and always needs to be high is armed. That is always true. All right. All right, great. Well, thank you, Captain Bry, for demonstrating that. I will incorporate that. I will just keep saying the same thing I've always said, as if you never did this. No, I will incorporate that into my knowledge going forward. So really appreciate that. Next up, Blunty, what do we got?
Next up, there was an all-digital race. Oh, sorry. I missed a story this time.
Oh, it's okay.
ImmersionRC has listed some products in short supply. So this is actually a pretty handy webpage ImmersionRC has decided to list for everybody. We've talked about a couple of these products before, but they've basically got a spot now where you can check and see, like, hey, we stopped making a product. Did we actually stop? When's it coming back? What's the supply? All that kind of stuff. So this is pretty cool.
And this is a big deal because ImmersionRC kind of has this habit of making a cool product and then stopping making it for like a really long time. Like I know people who have wanted to get the race timer, the ImmersionRC Lap RF timer. You can't buy it anywhere. It's just not available. I mean, like somewhere out there's one on eBay. But it's very nice to know, and it's hard to know what they've actually discontinued versus what they just haven't recently made in a while. Yeah. So what is coming up?
So we've got more Powerplays coming. So they're in production this month. So that's nice for people who wanted that Powerplay. I've been asked about that a few times. The RF,
analog DVR.
The ImmersionRF power meter we've talked about before. A great way to like a home way to do like a basic RF comparison testing and stuff. And they're going into a new production batch on that for a new version. So that should be coming pretty soon.
That's exciting.
They mentioned that the Tramp HV will no longer be produced. Likely that's for like the Ghost VTX stuff that they're doing instead. And then not least, the Lap RF that you talked about, they're waiting on supply. So once they can get supply, they'll start making them, and then they'll probably update this webpage. So yeah,
I mean, I know of those, I think the power meter is the one I'm most excited about. That thing is so useful, and it's a shame that you can't get it. People could benefit from it. But I also know some racers, and especially a couple of MultiGP clubs, who really would like to be able to get a Lap RF or a Lap RF 8-way. And the 8-way especially is just completely unavailable. So
they also mentioned on here at the bottom, if you want to go in, you can put a ticket into this system on the Fresh Desk and just say you want to do product availability for the product, and it'll send you a message when they've updated any information about it. So.
Oh, neat. All right. Well, thank you so much, ImmersionRC, for keeping us up to date on that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Next up, the story you tried to skip to because you were so excited about it. A race where they only ran HDZero.
Yes, absolutely. So this is pretty cool. We got some coverage by Ian, MadsTech. He went out to the race and basically gave his perspective, on everything that happened out there. Showed how the race worked. Talked to some of the people who set everything up and looked at the hardware design and like where everything was positioned and looked at some of the interference issues and stuff. It was a very good coverage from MadsTech and a pretty cool race, it seems like, for the pilots. They had a lot of interference issues, but it was kind of a really great time for them to work out like how all this stuff would work in one of these high RF environments and where to put everything, how to set everything up. So
sorry to interrupt you there. Speaking of RF interference, I want to see DVR. So here we are looking at some DVR. We know that one of the advantages of DJI is the way that it handles multipath, and HDZero, I think, is a little bit less tested just because it's not got as much time in the market and popularity. And I think we could clearly say that it's crushing analog in this environment. Obviously, we don't have an analog example, but we know what analog looks like in these types of environments.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you tuned in, there were some times where it was pretty bad. But again, they were just kind of trying to work out the kinks and figure it out. And they did fly some analog quads there, and they said they were rolling pretty bad. And it was pretty difficult to fly them because of the environment. So,
of course, one advantage of SharkBite, or HDZero, I should say, in racing is that you can spectate it. In DJI, you can't spectate except in audience mode, which is much, much worse than if you're actually what the pilot sees. Whereas with HDZero, because it's broadcast in nature, you can spectate it as an audience member if you have a HDZero receiver. So that's pretty cool.
They said there were a lot of folks out there watching too. A lot of folks came out with their HDZero receivers. So check it out. So.
Well, and the ability to easily get HDMI out of a HDZero receiver. Also, I mean, you can get HDMI out of the DJIs as well, but it's a little more tricky. Whereas that's just built into the HDZero. So that's really cool. I think it really speaks to how important racing is. I mean, we see this in auto sports, that racing is where you shake things down in a lot of ways. Racing, even if you don't race, racing is super important for advancing the state of technology in any hobby. So this is pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
How did I do, Blunty? I don't feel like I shit on HDZero enough. And I feel like the people who write my shill check at DJI are going to be disappointed. Should I be a little more negative? The image looked like crap. DJI would have looked so much better. Okay, there we go. I got it out of the way. Phew, that was a close one. I almost talked about HDZero in a positive way.
Realistically speaking, like we talked about last week on the news too, and we've said before, like the fact that you don't have the rolling, it's really a big benefit, because people who are watching that DVR footage, like even if you can fly through it and you get used to the breakup and they're on your face and stuff, like, people are going to want to watch that stuff. So yeah, it definitely looks a lot better, even with the flashing.
It's an interesting point you're making there, which is that as pilots, we are used to the way that analog breaks up. A lot of times we don't see it consciously. And then you show the DVR to someone who isn't used to it and they go, oh my God, how do you even, I'm having a seizure right now. And here's why I think that's interesting. Right now, a lot of people look at HDZero footage and they go, oh man, the white sparkles. Oh. I'll bet you after 6 months of flying HDZero, you don't even see them anymore. Just like you don't see analog breakup.
I definitely agree with that. I think the breakup is super learned. It's the same, similar with DJI. People were talking about how they hate the focus mode and how they can see the blurring on the edges and there's that break in between the edges in the middle, and how they don't like how the blurring works and the blocks and stuff. That's all I think learned as well.
Yeah, interesting. Alrighty, cool stuff. Next up, we have this is our clickbait story of the week. It is not clickbait, it is accurate, but it sure does. When I was writing the title for the news, I was like, which of these stories am I going to make the title? Well, we've got a story with Marques Brownlee, Tesla, and the Cybertruck and drones. So clearly that's the clickbaitiest one. What did Marques Brownlee have to say about drones and Tesla?
So basically, he pointed out, and I thought it was pretty interesting, that basically Tesla has a bunch of people, basically there's a bunch of YouTubers these days who will go out and film anything they can get their hands on for clicks, basically, right? So they're going to go get any video they can get, and drones are a great way to do that because you can fly over areas where you typically aren't allowed to be, and as long as they don't have any control over the airspace, there's not much they can do about it. But they might get mad at you, and the security guards might tell you to leave, and all that kind of stuff, right? So in documenting that kind of stuff and looking into this stuff, he realized that basically Tesla has supported this and kind of gone the other way with it. And so Tesla basically encourages people to come and fly over all their facilities and do daily checkups if they want, and see how all their stuff's going. And in this case, and in the most recent case, basically, somebody saw them working on the new Tesla Cybertruck outside, which seems to be clearly placed so that people would find it,
So Tesla is taking advantage of the desire of people to sort of paparazzi their stuff with drones by intentionally parking stuff where people can see it, whereas Apple calls the cops and tells you to leave.
Right.
Now, here's the question I think a lot of people are going to be interested in here. Oh, go ahead.
So I just want to point out, I believe I think he says in this video, Tesla spends almost nothing or absolutely nothing on marketing. I think it's absolutely nothing. He said the marketing budget is like zero. They basically have branding they make, and that's it. And they just like publish news articles and people interview them. And then all the other stuff comes from hype and people writing articles about them and people filming stuff like this and people like speculating and like, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Musk certainly is good at building hype. Here we got a picture of a drone flying over this area, over this facility.
That Cybertruck.
Now, here's what I think the interesting question that comes up is, like, we know, assuming this is in the United States, which it may not be, but if the facility is in the United States, the airspace is controlled by the FAA, and there's no sort of such thing as private airspace. So if I want to fly my drone over a Apple facility or anything, it's like if I want to fly an aircraft, you can't tell me I can't fly in that airspace. Same with drones. But I think a lot of people are going to look at that footage like and go, I mean, clearly you're in the airspace, but like clearly you're pretty damn close to the ground. You practically, you know, and wonder. Now, in this case, obviously, if Tesla's fine with it, then Tesla's fine with it. But I think it's going to raise some eyebrows for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another case of where people are going to do, you know, over the line, you know, in some of these cases, like a lot of times they do. I think even in this, like he mentions in the video, like, is this over the line? These people are working on a vehicle outside of the building and you're like flying up next to them with the drone.
Yeah.
And is that like expected of them at their job, or is that like, you know, like there's all these kind of different like things to ask about that. So
yeah. It reminds me of the time when someone flew a drone down into a football stadium. It's like, now setting aside the fact that there are FAA rules about flying over people and over large gatherings, which you know, but like if you fly over a stadium, are you in the airspace? What if you fly down into the stadium? Are you still in the airspace? Like the FAA, if you're not undercover, the FAA says you're in the airspace and you're regulated. At that point, then, does that mean that the stadium owner doesn't have the legal right to tell me that I can't hover in the middle of on the 50-yard line because I'm in the airspace of the national airspace? I don't think you and I are going to answer that question, but it does raise some interesting questions.
Oh, and it's also weird because like if you're covered but the side's open, then it still counts as covered. You know, like there's all these weird rules that happen. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that all shakes out. But most of the time you end up flying over people to get there and you end up breaking all the other rules too. So
good point. The takeaway from this story, though, is that number one, Marques Brownlee talked about drones, which is cool. And number two, Elon Musk is a freaking marketing genius. But we knew that.
Yes. Yeah.
All righty. Next up, we have a new update from Brian White. Brian White is the creator of the tool PIDToolbox, which is used to analyze black box logs and evaluate the PID response, the performance of your PID controller. And he released a PID tuning method a while back called the basement PID tuning method. So most people, when you PID, do you PID tune, Blunty? Do you do a lot of PID tuning?
Sometimes, like if it's really weird, but typically I'm a preset kind of guy. Like good enough, you know.
Yeah, I as much as I am known for talking about PID tuning, most of the time when I actually fly a quad, I just sort of fly the defaults or fly a preset. I rough it in because who's got time for that? And that's the argument that Brian is making, that you don't have to go out, you don't have to do rip, snort, and turns and snap rolls around a field, that you can just kind of hover a quad and do little movements in your basement. That's why he calls it the basement PID tune. And then use PIDToolbox to get a good PID tune. But a lot of people, like, you crash if you try to actually fly it in your basement. So check out what he's got. Angle mode. Look, he's going to PID tune this quad. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he's showing basically how he normally tunes it, which is like in acro, you know, you're just like LOSing and trying to get some movements in and kind of shaking it around inside. And a lot of new pilots especially, but a lot of pilots in general are just uncomfortable with LOS in such a way as to keep that quad steady as he's doing there, right?
I could not. I mean, I have basic ability to hover in line of sight, but I could not do those movements and keep it in that small of a space. That's beyond me.
Right, and so he's basically said, like, well, now you can do that a lot easier if you instead switch it to angle mode. and do the same thing, because it turns out that if you look at step response curves and you do all the testing, it actually works out that angle mode gives you the same response curves, and it's not a problem, basically. So I think for a while at least some people were concerned. I know he said he didn't think it would be the same, but he finally drilled down, did all the testing, and figured out that it works fine, and it's much easier.
Well, I'm interested to try it. I actually started working on a video doing his basement PID tune method some months ago, and I got well into it only to discover that my flight controller had a bad gyro, and then I had to throw basically all of the work out, and I was so frustrated. I just I'm just going to not think about this for a while, so maybe it'll be time for me to get back to it. But yeah. Ultimately, how can you, because Mark Spatz, UAV Tech's argument is that when you do PID tuning, you need to do big moves. If you're just doing like slow turns, you're not really activating the PID controller enough to really tell if your tune is any good. So he always tunes by doing big snap rolls, throttle punches, and so forth. To be able to PID tune with just little tiny movements in your basement, it seems like you're really taking two different paths up that mountain. I'm really interested to see the result.
On the alternative aspect, though, like you don't have wind or outside forces to deal with when you're doing it in the basement with an angle. So you have like more known inputs. And it's a little less variant when, because he was pointing out if you do perfect step response inside, the quad will fly well outside. But if you look at step response, it might be poor because of some reactions it had during flight, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Great Southern FPV asks, with PID tuning, this may be a dumb question, but why don't we have an adaptive PID tuning tool in Betaflight? The short answer is that, so Betaflight and other flight control firmwares have had automatic PID tuning of various kinds. And the short answer is that it is way harder and more complicated than it seems like it ought to be to actually do it well, while not just crashing the quad and destroying it.
There have been a couple of recent discussions in the Betaflight Discord, if you want to hop in there and talk to people about it. But basically, the consensus is if you want to do it, you can code it, because there's a lot of challenge to it. And I'm sure people will help you work through it mentally and figure out how it would be done and what the best processes and procedures are and stuff. But it seems like somebody is going to have to hop in and like take the horns and like do that project, So.
I mean, we certainly have a lot more computing power than we did the last time I remember there being a PID auto tune in Betaflight or clean flight.
I was just going to say, so one of the discussions was whether you need to do live analysis and make adjustments on the fly, or whether you can do arm, disarm analysis over and over again, and then save processor cycles so you don't need to use like a heavy processor, right? But there's a mess to it. There's a lot, like QuickFlash says, it's a mess, and there's a lot of pieces to it, and how you exactly handle it. So and then people are talking about like, do you do trick on a switch and have it do input switches, and then try to make it so that you're always doing the same input moves, and how do you account for wind and elevation, and there's all these pieces to it. And then the questions are, how much of that do you need, because you can basement tune, and again, it really needs a head of that project. It's what it seems like from me looking at people talk about it in Betaflight, because nobody is really like, all right, gung-ho, I'm going to take a hold of this and do it. Everybody's kind of like, this seems really hard and difficult.
The devs seem to have focused on making the defaults as good as possible for the widest variety of people, as opposed to automating the ability to PID tune for a specific build. What I remember is that you would activate the PID tune mode, and the quad would kind of twitch all over the place and measure its own step response, and then try to adjust the gains in real time. But what would sometimes happen is it would just go and fly away as the gains went to the moon in a feedback loop. And other times it would finish the PID auto-tune, but actually the result maybe wasn't that great. And it only did P and D anyway. It didn't do I. And now that we have PID controllers with P, D, I, and feed forward, and it just is not as simple as you think when you say, why don't we just auto PID tune? It's, yeah. Sure. But if you, Great Southern FPV, are a coder and are interested in taking the reins, I'm sure a lot of people would be interested.
Even if you feel like you have a healthy discussion you can have from a basic level of like engineering understanding and like what the actual challenges are, there are good talks about it, that people have. Yeah. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to have. So yeah.
I like the idea that you would run a flight and then it would analyze the black box after you're done flying and like try to make recommendations. I like that idea. It does seem like there's, like when you look at like Mark Spatz or you look at Brian White describe what they see in the black box logs when they PID tune, it feels like there are things that you could look for algorithmically to try to adjust those things. But the problem is edge cases. And there are a lot of edge cases in quadcopters, unfortunately. Edge cases are not the norm. It feels like something Yogi Berra would be saying. The problem with edge cases is that there's so many of them. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. The MultiGP. So when you told me this, the MultiGP track had been selected, I said, didn't we just have nationals?
Kind of. Yeah. Basically, AyyyKayy's track has been selected for the second year in a row. He won by 1 vote. So if you ever said your vote didn't count, it sure did in this case. Because he won by 1 vote. But yeah, his is a new MultiGP track. So pretty simple, but got a nice little flow to it.
I mean, I'm going to have to watch it like 5 times before it makes any sense to me.
Right. A lot of popover kind of stuff, which I like. I typically like that, where you're kind of back and forth across and you're like sort of popping over and popping back.
That's a really nice element right there. That's actually a nice element too. Over the hurdle and then down and around. Yeah.
It's exercising a lot of that flow to it, you know?
Yeah. It's a relatively short track, I think. I've seen tracks with more gates and more elements, especially it's a GQ track, not a nationals track, but this, I actually really like this. I really like this. It's going to be relatively easy for chapters to build and people to practice, and yet still somehow, it's not a lot of it doesn't look like it takes up a lot of space either. Yeah,
not too big. It doesn't look too big for sure. If you would like to go, if you ever want to go check that track out before it's officially published, you can go into Velocidrone and hit the track editor. And then if you type in AyyyKayy's name in the name box, you'll see his 2022 GQ. So you can go fly it in Velocidrone.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, AyyyKayyy, for that. I cannot let this comment pass because it's a particular soapbox of mine. Ghostbranch FPV asks, whatever happened to the project that aimed at replacing the PID controller with an AI? What was it called? Neuroflight? I don't think Neuroflight was ever actually, did it ever actually like work? I don't know. I don't think you know.
I don't know that it worked well. I think, because Drone Mesh took over it, or not took over it, but forked it and then tried to do MeshFlight for a while.
Yeah.
But he found the same issue. But basically, the idea behind Neuroflight was training in a simulator and using that simulator data to then fly a quad.
Yeah, I remember, I can't remember, like when people would ask about it, there were like 3 major ways that I felt that it was being misrepresented as being more than it was, and that at its heart, it was just a PID controller, and they were kind of overselling it. Now it's been long enough, I can't remember. But no, Drone Mesh has kind of dropped off the radar too. He hasn't updated in like 6 months, I think. So
yeah, I haven't seen anything from him in a while. So.
All right, well, hopefully he's doing well, but I think Neuroflight is, if it ever was anything, it isn't anymore. But it was open source, so I suppose someone could pick it up if they wanted to.
Yep. Anybody can go fork Neuroflight. I don't think MeshFlight ever got public, was made public, the work they did on that. So you'd have to start back with Neuroflight.
All righty. All right, moving on. Blunty, you got some events that are coming up, some races coming up in the world. Tell us about them.
All right, so the first one up is Whoop Wars Battleground. This will be the second year they've done this. It's a big whoop race over at Full Send FPV in Denver, Colorado. This will be happening from April 25th to the 23rd to the 25th. It's $60 per person, and that'll get you into the individual racing with 64 people. And then they'll do different brackets. And I know last year we had prizes per class, so I think there's 4 different classes. So even if you're a slow pilot, you can come and hopefully you'll find your way to the top of one of the classes.
Oh, that's nice. 4 classes gives a lot of room for people of all abilities to race against people of similar ability and potentially win a prize. The other one is FPV Combat Camp?
Yeah, so FPV Combat, we've talked about a little bit, is basically a solution to attach to either your flight controller or just a bunch of parts, right? And then you can play a combat game in the OSD with other people who are also using it. It interfaces with Alex Greaves' the VAS system. And basically, they are having a kind of get-together, big hangout thing in Model City in the Czech Republic, I believe. So if you're over there, this might be exciting because I don't know how many events are there for you. But yeah, they're going to do like a 5-day hangout in field and stuff, or in rentable bungalows that are in the area. And 40 people can go out there. Tickets start at 25 euros, but you might want to check the details there because there are some fees for like being on the site and stuff. But yeah, it seems pretty cool. So
Now, when we talk about combat, are we talking about like streamer cutting? Or are we talking about the FPV sort of laser tag system?
Yeah, laser tag essentially.
Oh, nice.
With the control of servos and like shakes in the flight and stuff like that too.
So it's going to be fixed wing planes, servos, not multi.
Yeah, you can basically do anything you want there, but I think most people there will probably have fixed wing planes. With
Gotcha.
servos, so.
It really seems like a multi-rotor would be able to dominate over a fixed wing because of its maneuverability, but maybe not. Good question. Did I lose your audio?
Hello?
No, I didn't. It just your noise canceling cut out right there.
Ah, I see.
Now, I don't want anybody to think that just because the Whoop Wars was in Denver that we're giving home field preference to Blunty, who's from Denver. If you have any events that are coming up that you want to see us advertise on the news, just send them to news@fpvknowitall.com, like all of the news submissions, and we will probably get it on the news. Okay. Blunty, earlier when we were looking at the GQ, we looked at Velocidrone, and now we're going to look at Liftoff and talk about how a Liftoff level is designed, how a racetrack or Liftoff level is designed.
Liftoff level, like a location. So.
Oh, like the whole map is what we're really talking about here, not just the track.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so basically this was their Liftoff track that lets you chase the moving vehicles. And then, yeah, he just discusses, basically he goes through, if you've ever been interested in like kind of the game design or level design aspects of things, that's, his job as a game dev. So he basically, goes through here and talks about his, like how they went from the ideas and talked to people and made sure they knew what they wanted and worked it up, did some sketches and renders for stuff. Did blockouts for everything, and he shows some of the pictures of the blockouts and the early textures and stuff that they did. He reviews first. I mean, this is really a detailed and really cool thing. So, yeah, I think if you're ever interested in anything like that, this is one of the coolest write-ups for something in our hobby.
I mean, it really gives a look behind the scenes. Like, you don't want to put a shitload of work into making a super detailed map if then you're going to change. You're going to like, oh, wait, I don't want this thing to be here. So it really gives a look into how it builds up, the structure of the map, and then eventually all the way to the sort of final completion of the details. There's so many details into making a map of this size. It's really insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, people can check that out if they want to. And then, of course, you can go fly that map in Liftoff if you are so inclined. Next up, we have, is it the fastest sub 250 gram drone? Is it confirmed?
I don't know that it's confirmed. I don't know that I did not find a lot of other people who are trying to do the fastest sub 250 drone. So I'm not sure how big that bracket is.
We'll leave it to Quad Mover. This video has so many views, and I think some of it has to be this quad looks so weird and cool. But like all top speed quads, it's very focused on aerodynamics. Do we have any details about the specs of the quad?
Yeah, I think he's got it in the description there.
Oh, we got some stuff in the title, actually. 1408 motors.
Oh, right. Yeah, 1408 motors, 3600 kV, 75 millimeter props, T-mount, I believe. Oh, no, these are by 5 because he was trying to find ones that were by 5.
Mm-hmm. Surprising. Oh, no. Okay, most of the people who do top speed runs are using bi-blade props. Very surprising that he's using a 5-blade prop, but I'm sure he had a good reason for it.
Says main reason is the use of T-mount motors, which prevented the use of props like APC. I tried several different T-mount props, and surprisingly, the 5-blade 75 by 5 resulted in the highest speed. Generally, less blades is more efficient for speed, as you said, using motors with an M5 mount will probably be a better choice.
Well, let's listen to the flyby, because that's what everybody wants, of course. He flies his line of sight. He's one of the best line of sight pilots I know. Like, probably in existence. Of course, he's just doing speed runs here. Actually, I think he flew this FPV. There is FPV footage later. Here's a pass.
He might have just had a camera on it.
I guess that's possible.
Sometimes he just sticks the camera on there.
Yeah. He certainly doesn't need it. Let's do another pass here. How fast did he go? The speed is... Where's the speed? Where's the GPS speed? There's 207 kilometers per hour he hit.
Yeah, his highest speed he hit was 219. So he said he was aiming for 250, so I think he's going to keep trying.
Yeah. Now we know 5-inch quads have gone faster than that, but that's still pretty fast for a sub 250. Here's something I've never figured out, Blunty, and I don't know if you know the answer, but you know they do these speed runs, and for official speed runs, they'll do like 2 runs, one way and one the other way to account for wind, right? How do they account for altitude? Like if you think about it, if you dive, you're going to gain speed. Does that just not count?
Oh, right. I thought you meant like where they're located physically, but yeah, that also makes sense. Yeah, I'm not really sure because you would also think like if you go to the lowest place that's not underwater, that would be better, right? Because you have thicker air.
Sea level, yeah. I mean, a thicker air, though, think about it. Your props will get more thrust, but you also will have more air resistance. So maybe actually doing it, I don't know. I've never heard of a speed run actually account for change in altitude. Like you have to do one run into the wind and one run with the wind or whatever, you know, and you know, then Guinness Books will certify you. But I've never heard of them accounting for altitude. Cool
I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah. Well, keep at it. Keep at it, Quad Mover. I'm sure you'll get there. What's next, Blunty?
All right. So, America's Got Talent. I don't know if we want to show this video.
No, we probably don't.
Striked.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get copy striked.
I'm just going to mention that before we do it because last time we had the issue with Radiohead. So,
I don't want to get copy striked. So, unfortunately, well, it does make the... There's a link in the video description to the show.
Yes, there's a link in the video description if you'd like to check it out. But basically, the long and short of it is that on the recent shot of America's Got Talent, they basically, a bunch of people went on there and they did a drone show that they all custom built, this like drone company, and Verge Aero. And they were so impressed that they decided to kick them all the way to the finals automatically.
Wow.
So they basically went from tryouts to automatically being in the finals. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it's a drone show like just a computer controlled drone light show?
Yeah, just like we've seen previously in a bunch of different cases, but basically just these 4 engineers all built it together and did it on stage for them. And yeah, it was pretty cool because none of them had ever seen a drone. It was outdoors. I believe they were doing it outdoors. But it was pretty compact. And yeah, it's just cool because a lot of people are watching that, you know. Tons of people saw that episode of America's Got Talent, and even more people are going to find out about drones. So pretty cool.
Nice. That's really cool.
In a good way.
In a good way. That's what we want. Positive tech, positive coverage of drones. All right, well, people can go check that out in the show notes after the show is over if they want to see that. Oh, gracious, Blunty, I skipped another one. The hydraulic motors drone. Can we push that to next week? I don't think I put that. I think we had so many stories this week. Can we push that?
That was our most submitted story.
We better get it, but we're not gonna. Hang on a second. I got this. Hang on 1 second. No, I got this. Well, watch what I can do.
You need like a generic.
No, but I can just. I have the. Hang on.
All right. Done.
Guess what? I can just change it right here. Okay, continue.
All right. So this drone It uses hydraulic motors to stay in the air, which is pretty cool. People have tried a bunch of different systems for getting drones to stay in the air to do long flight times. And they've tried different things like just general combustion engines driving electrical systems, and a lot of cross systems and different mixes and stuff. But these guys think they've found the ticket, and this is the first hydraulic system that's been built. They basically found a way to power it with a combustion engine, but the combustion engine powers these things they're calling digital displacement pumps, which are basically like these little hydraulic pumps that can work extremely quickly and respond to extremely fast movements. So they're using these displacement pumps to power the motors and spin them up and down very quickly, just like you would do with an electric.
Oh, hang on, we got some audio here. Sorry about that. Well, wanted people to see it fly. Didn't mean to interrupt you there, Blunty. Yeah.
So they're still working through it, but it definitely works.
I can see why it's tethered. I am glad it's tethered. I can see that it has some issues. Yes, it's technically flying.
I would assume motor response time is something they're dialing in. It seems like the biggest issue in something like this. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that they're doing it at all is pretty cool, though. Very cool.
Yeah.
I do not volunteer to test
the big
fly.
thing is, so the big thing here is that flight time and cost. So they're able to get this to $1,000 for total cost, and it can fly for 6 hours on one fuel tank with its combustion engine. So as long as it doesn't shake all the way over the place, they can actually get it flying pretty well.
Right.
Yeah, it might be actually a decent solution.
Nice. Very cool. I think the traditional way that that's done is to just run a gasoline generator to power a battery and basically just run it off electric motors. I mean,
yeah, I think you just get less efficiency from that. I think they're saying like they can achieve higher efficiency by powering these hydraulic motors instead.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's new to me. I had never heard of that. So, alrighty. Very cool. Next up, Blunty, you have rounded up a bunch of FPV podcasts.
Oh, hold on.
Oh.
This one.
No. Did I miss? No. Have I missed? Wow. We had so many stories. Okay. Okay, hang on. I can do this.
All right.
Okay, great. I just do it in real time.
This is a pretty cool story. One of our viewers actually sent this in. Brady. He has a little story here. Basically, he was trying to find his downed wing. And I think this is a common problem that a lot of people have is like, hey, I lost my wing in the middle of the woods. I don't know where the heck it is. And I don't know what to do. So he spent a long time looking for it. He wandered around where he thought it went down, and he really couldn't find it. So he flew his drone around for a little bit, his Mavic Mini 2. And so he couldn't find it over the Mini 2. He said it was hard to see with the pictures, and he went back and looked at the video a little bit. But then he did some research, and he found a website that basically USRI CA, and they make a program called Locate.
Okay.
And basically, Locate is an image analysis software that uses AI to scrub through videos and sequences of images to try to find outline, colors, and pixel matching. And essentially, through a lot of trial and error on a trial version of this program, be warned, this is a $700 program, but he did this with a free version in a trial, was able to narrow down his wing in the middle of a place where he had no idea where it was. So the first day, he couldn't find it. And basically he thought, well, maybe it's somewhere else, so let me keep trying. He went out and did a bigger area, and it started to narrow down in the area where to go. So then he was able to go back to that area and drill in a little farther, and yeah, he was actually able to locate it. So
I mean, there's no way that if you were looking at this manually, you would notice that.
Right, it's impossible.
No way.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah. So this is pretty fascinating, and if you're like at your wit's end and you don't know what to do, it might be worth your time to give a shot for Locate and give a trial to this company. So pretty cool. He's not affiliated, and of course it's free to try this. There's not like a like you will have to pay if you want to keep using it, but you can rescue your wing without paying. So it's pretty cool.
That's really cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe give Locate a shot. And if you find anything with this, please let us know. But he said basically it gave him exact GPS coordinates based off the picture and his location data, and he was able to walk to it and pick it up. So.
Badass. That's really badass. I'm glad we didn't overlook that.
Yeah.
Because
pretty neat.
Okay. Let's see if I've got the titles right next time. That's why the show was late, by the way. It was because I was like, oh shit, I got to do the titles. And now you can see that I did them under a rush and messed them up. So, Blunty, when you told me that you had an FPV podcast roundup for the news, my first question was, so are these like the good ones? And you were like, I'm not going there. We're not going there because everybody likes different things. What was your criteria for including a podcast in this roundup, though?
So basically, I dug around, I asked some folks, I tried to find what people listen to, and then I found what was listed. And then basically I went and looked to find who had been updating in at least the last month or so, somewhere around there. And who basically has made a few episodes, and it seemed like a thing that was happening. So with that, I was able to find 8 podcasts that are in the FPV space.
Yeah.
7 of them English and 1 German, if you're a German.
Oh, very nice.
And there's also a German podcast for you. So we'll just quickly run over them. I figured we'd just talk real quickly about them. So Good Flight is Nurk and Johnny Drones. Pretty cool little podcast. They go over some of the cinematic stuff, and that's good.
Yeah, I've been on there. That's a good podcast. I enjoyed it.
Let's Drone Out is kind of I would refer to it as a madhouse. I think they might as well. You can see how many people are listed there, but it's basically like a good time with a bunch of guys, and they have a guest on.
Yeah. And somehow they are still on. They've been doing their show for a long time. They're really fun, and I think they're maybe one of the longest running FPV podcasts that is still going.
Yeah, for sure. I think they've been out there a long time. We've got another one coming up that's been there for a minute. But next up, we've got Jawspin, which is a newer podcast from Sync FPV and Mike Duran. I think they're on episode 7 now, so I wanted to shout them out. They seem to be going pretty strong. FPV Raw, I've heard quite a few people mention this one. This one has been going on for quite a long time. I'm not sure exactly when, but I think 2017 or maybe earlier is when he's been doing this for. So that's Ruben doing the FPV Raw podcast. And then Team Failsafe also has Ruben on it with Mr. Steele and Co-Nasty, and they do an episode every few months. But they seem to do that pretty regularly.
Every few months. That's okay.
It's regular enough. They keep doing it, so I'll put it on there.
All right. Well, it is Mr. Steele, so I mean he's got a lot of draw.
We've also got the Quadcast with this Jarvis, Elkoy, and Blaze That Ish. They've got a cool little podcast to check out as well. We've got Onigiri and Co., which is Onigiri FPV and My On High. Got their own podcast. And then also, last but not least, we've got Propgeflüster. I think that's how you say that. With Steffi, Patty, and Chris, which is a German podcast.
That's really cool.
Get into your German-only FPV stuff.
How long before someone in the comments tells us a podcast that updates regularly, is still updating, and that you missed?
I don't know. Hopefully not long, because maybe I hope
no, it's really cool that you did that research. Are we a podcast? Do we podcast?
I mean, technically, we podcast to your patrons because you put it out as a podcast, right?
That's true. It's audio.
But I don't know if I'd really consider it a podcast.
DTFPV says the FPV Freedom Coalition has a podcast.
Oh, right. I remember we talked about that a while back.
Podcast. All right, let's get that into the show notes. I'm going to add that. Well, I should really put that in the show notes that people can actually get to. I like that. Here we go. Hang on. I'm going to put it in the video description. Thank you for that. Got it. Let's see. Yeah. Cool. Stay up to date on drone regulations. Alrighty. I can't decide if this next story is... Hang on. What is Sea Sport?
That's the one you told me to get rid of, and you didn't. You deleted half the name, so I'm not...
Oh, okay, great. One? We're pushing that one to next week, because we're out of titles. Although at this point, Yeah, let's just push it. Let's not try to change things in the middle of the stream. That would be super awkward.
All right. So let's take a look at the drone cinematic of the week. We started doing this last week. I think we'll try to do this on the regular. We've got a cool little one shot.
Okay,
the NHL
let me get this like full screen, and we'll go over to the right side. Here we go. Drone cinematic of the week. We're not going to play the audio so we don't get copy strikes, but
not meant to be the most amazing thing you've ever seen, but just a cool little one shot.
Nice timing getting this hockey player. That's a nice move. I want to watch that again, knowing the hockey player's coming.
Check out how it finishes too. I feel like it's a good.
Great. We're gonna watch this at least one more time. There's a lot going on right with this one. Very nice. Oh, is it loop? Is it a loop?
Yeah, it cuts into loop. Yeah.
I wish I could loop it. I don't know how I can loop it here. So there's a lot I like about this. It's just good looking. It's good flying. Good color grade. One of the things I really dig though is it's really got a sort of a beginning, a middle, and the end. So here we've got the flying on the bridge, right? The hockey player is going to be our subject, but we start with a little bit of an intro. Now we set up the hockey player, and managing the speed of the drone versus the speed of the subject while keeping the subject centered, while not just kind of doing snaps and stuff, but making the movement really fluid. Excellent, excellent flying. Right here he breaks away. It looked like you might be getting a little too close to the guy. Breaks away and comes back in. And then, boom, we've got our loop. Very nice. Very, very nice. Excellent. There's a lot you could learn from watching that.
Yeah, I agree. Pretty cool one shot. If you have a one shot, please submit it. For sure. To the news. And anything else you have, submit to news at fpvknowitall.com.
One of the things I first noticed when Johnny FPV did it, so I'll credit it to him, but that's only when I noticed it, was when he's chasing a car and he's about at the end of his range and he needs to get off. A lot of people are just like, okay, I'm just going to come home now. And Johnny will break away and kind of come up and give you a horizon, and then so that you have something to, you're not just cutting away from the car. And I was like, oh, that's a pro move right there. And I see it more and more people do that when they'll chase something. Like eventually you have to break off, but don't just break off. Like have something to transition out to. It's really good. All right. Next up, everybody wants the rant. We got one more thing to do before the rant, though. And that is a new segment you came up with called It's Barely News.
We just got a few things on here. We're going to knock through them real quick. There's a couple things that didn't seem like they needed their own spot, but we wanted to let you know about. Mm-hmm. So we try not to get political here, but there is, basically a war going on over in the Ukraine. And the Ukraine is asking people, civilians and military, whoever's got it, to bring them drones or fly their drones if you're willing to do that, and get reconnaissance and intel with civilian drones. So this is pretty interesting to see. There are some attacks and stuff going on as well, but a lot of positive things going on with drones, helping for surveillance and reconnaissance in this situation. So you never know when your drone might become useful for somebody. Well,
and although we do try to stay out of politics, this is specifically drone related politics. So,
right.
How about
they also talk about no limit drones. So that's a program you can use to unlock your DJI drone, and typically those cost money. And basically, if you scroll up real quick. They talk about it, but basically you can see there's NFZ kits there that they have as well, but also there's a software unlock, and they're doing free unlocks for people who are in Ukraine and doing this work. So,
oh, nice. I don't like the sound of this. Any source of suspected radio emissions may be immediately identified and eliminated by the Russians. That,
actually got to be honest, you've got to hit it, right? So,
well, I'm not talking about the drone. I'm talking about the controller.
Sure. But when you're in those close quarters, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see if they actually had that tech. If you look at, I don't want to get too far into it, but if you look at what they're actually rolling out there with it, they don't even have night vision goggles. I don't think they have a device like an aeroscope. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Still, very cool to see drones being. I mean, it's cool that a nerd like me, if I lived in Ukraine, you know, they say, well, hey, can you carry a rifle? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'll do my part, sir, but I got this bad knee and I'm actually really kind of out of shape. So, but they're like, hey, can you fly a drone? I'll be like, oh, I can do this job. I can do this job. All right. Very cool. Next up, in It's Barely News.
We've got drone lifeguards. So the Little Ripper is a powered drone lifeguard that does a couple different jobs, and it's pretty cool. So basically, they've got AI programs to detect and see down on the ground or down on the sea what is a shark versus a manta ray or whatever else is going to be down there, right? Other fish and stuff, and then it can alert the lifeguards on duty in the area to let people know there's sharks in the area.
And this is another case where they're using AI, similar to the location tool we showed earlier.
Right, exactly.
Slick.
And then not only that, they've got about a 90% success rate with the sharks, which is pretty good if you can let people know. But also, they can detect people drowning, and then people remotely from the shore can go drop life preservers with the drones, so they don't have to like swim out and try to save somebody immediately. They can just have somebody swimming out while they're going and dropping them something to save them. So
nice,
pretty cool.
Very cool. And then one more item in It's Barely News.
Yeah, so the Echo SAR is a new device that you can attach to the bottom of a drone, and you can use people's cell phones as rescue beacons in a rescue scenario and situation on a mountain. So if somebody's buried under the snow or just lost somewhere and they've got a cell phone on them that's still given a beacon, you can fly a drone and quickly find them if they're out there. Pretty cool.
So will it automatically search for the signals and like hover where the person is or something?
I think it can basically give you a visual map, like in a tool, to show you where those people are from the drone, basically.
Neat. So you got to keep your phone on if you're buried in an avalanche.
Yeah. Or if you hear the drone, turn it on. You know?
I mean, they say when you're in an avalanche, the first thing you need to do is you need to get some breathing space on your face, and then you got to get your phone out and you got to be just like, so you can post to Insta. You get that sweet. No, okay, never mind.
All right.
All right. Last up, we have got the segment everyone's been waiting for, the rant of the week.
Yeah.
And today
I'm gonna pin this one on you. You brought this rant.
I did, but I think you're going to participate in it, or I wouldn't have brought it up. UAV Tech, Mark Spatz. Mark Spatz has a chip on his shoulder about KISS. Would you agree with that statement?
That's true. Yes.
What would you go ahead.
I can expand that statement.
See, I knew you would participate.
Mark Spatz has a chip on his shoulder for any logs that are not for any logs that are not as accurate as the logs could be.
You mean the performance of the quad, the performance of the PID controller?
Yes. Like if you look at the logs and compare the logs, takes issues if the logs are not perfect, basically.
I think he's got a chip on his shoulder against KISS, and the reason is that I think he thinks that KISS is over. What's the word I'm looking for? I think he thinks people like KISS for the wrong reasons, for dumb reasons, and it's not as good as people say it is, and it annoys him that they say KISS is so good when I have logs that say that it's worse. I think that's and that brings us to the video that inspired this rant, which is a video where he said basically he took KISS, he took FetTech firmware and Betaflight, and is this the right video? I think it is. And he tested them. He did flight tests. Looking for things like throbbles and bounce back. Keep going. Right? And sure enough, Betaflight was the best.
Yeah, and he did test these on defaults just to start there, but I think he has issues kind of all over the board, obviously.
Yeah.
With that kind of stuff. So I think I don't know. First of all, when you brought this up to me before the show, my initial response was, I am just so tired of this. Like, I'm so tired of caring about this, right? It's just like, it's getting old, right? Because I don't know. So UAV tech often uses this term called flat earther for people. And he basically says, he compares people who tune off a feel, or not tune off a feel, but believe feel is the primary thing versus a clean log. He believes those people are essentially like the flat earthers of the FPV industry. He says that multiple times. And so, I don't know. I just take issue with the fact that this point has been continually pushed repeatedly. But at the end of the day, isn't the thing that matters, do people like flying it or not? Right?
Yeah. So here's where I'm picking on Mark a little bit here, and I don't want to make it I'm actually in my heart on Mark's side. Like, if I had to pick sides here, I'd be like, I want to be sitting at Mark's table at the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Because
I like it from a science perspective, I am, but from a practicality, hey, we have to live in the real world perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. So
his argument is that what makes a quadcopter fly good is that the PID controller causes the quad to move in such a way that it accurately tracks the commands of the sticks. And the way that you could put that in from a PID control perspective is you could say that the gyro follows the set point. And he will show you a black box log where the stick moves and the set point moves and the gyro moves and tracks the set point accurately. And he'll say, see, I have a perfectly flying quad. And he's right. If you think about a quadcopter as a PID controller whose goal is to follow the set point, then you could argue that Betaflight is the best flying one, and he does. But I made the argument on my previous live stream that I was like, that's like buying a camera by looking at a test pattern, and whichever camera represents the test pattern the clearest, that's the camera you buy. Well, that's the first thing I would say is there's a lot more to buying a camera than just does it accurately depict. You could buy a camera because you like the controls, you like the ergonomics. You could buy it because it's like people buy Leica cameras, and that's just the cachet of the brand. They just want to have a Leica camera, like however you say it. So there's a whole lot of reasons to buy. You could buy it because you like the culture. You may just like Alex and you want to be in his Discord server. There's a million reasons to buy a flight controller. But even if you set that aside and focus just on the flight performance, if people like how it flies and are happy flying it, then the fact that, like, there's so many people who say, I flew Betaflight for a long time, I didn't like it, I couldn't get it to fly good, I flew KISS, I like it, it flies good for me. And at that point, that's all. What more do you need?
Sure. I think, I don't know. There's a bunch of ways we could go in this discussion, but I think most of them point me in the direction of like, it shouldn't matter, just let people fly what they want to fly. And I think his point is like, why are you buying an inferior product? Right? That's the way he presents it. Is like, this product is worse because its job is to control the PIDs to the motors, and it's doing a worse job at that. But it is achieving something. It may have the wrong way of achieving it. Right? Like, maybe the better way to achieve it is the Betaflight way, where everything is perfect. Like the gyro matches the set point as fast as you can, but then you put delay somewhere to match what's happening in KISS, right? To emulate that. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you're still happening. Something is happening there that people can feel, that does feel different, and that is good for them and they appreciate. So to me, like, those are positive things. And like, I don't know if it. And some of the way they're doing development is like, hey, we're going to make these changes, and then we're going to ask you, does it fly better or worse? And we're not going to tell you what the changes were. Or, hey, we're going to continue to make these updates, and we're going to take user feedback to decide whether it's better or worse or what direction to go. And in those cases, like, while some of the objective facts can help you, and they do help you, and that's how Betaflight does things, I think there is point where subjective things can also help. You know, people in the chat say it's simply placebo. It's not placebo because it flies differently. That's the thing. Okay, it doesn't fly the same. So you can't say it's placebo because it's not the same thing.
Right. You can objectively, you can look at black box logs and you can objectively demonstrate that KISS, FetTech, etc. do not fly the same as Betaflight. It's not just placebo. There are differences.
You can say, I mean, you could try to say it's like placebo that you think it flies better. But the fact that it's flying differently means you're feeling something different, and that's going to affect your feel there. And it's not like it's true placebo. That's what I would think there.
I mean, I think that some of Mark's annoyance. I mean, if I were Mark, I would be annoyed that Betaflight doesn't get as much credit as it probably deserves for the work of the devs going into trying to make Betaflight fly better. Betaflight is way more popular than KISS in terms of just pure numbers. And so there are going to be a lot of people who fly Betaflight who, for whatever reason, like they're flying it on a shitty, cheap quad or something. They have shitty DYS Samguk motors, and it's going to be bad for them. And maybe then for some reason KISS works better because it's like more filtered or something. I don't know. But the point is that when you have that many people flying, there's going to be a wide variety of experiences. And some people just by random chance are going to have a bad experience with Betaflight and then have a good experience with KISS and be like, KISS is my savior. And whereas there aren't a ton of people out there saying Betaflight is the best flying quad I've ever flown. It's just kind of the default, but there are a ton of people flying it.
Right. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, my viewpoint on this is like, if somebody is happier flying it, then that person is happier and they enjoy the flying.
And that's all, that's like what it's all about.
That's literally like, that's what the goal is, right? The goal, while some people's goal is to make the quad fly as best as possible, if the quad flies as good as the person wants it and they're happy with how it flies, to me, like that's the goal. The goal isn't to hit exactly set point to gyro and be perfect, right?
And you might say, well, some people want to drive a Lotus car, like a really light sports car with extremely sharp steering while you're tracking the set point. Some people want to drive a freaking, a Cadillac where, oh God, the steering is so soft. You're not tracking the set point. I don't know. It's got leather seats and,
why don't you have the car with the best efficiency, or why don't you have the car with the best ratios, or why don't you have the car with the most horsepower or the best torque or whatever. Like there's all these things that people decide all these different kinds of cars because they look better, or they like how they feel, or they like the smooth ride, or they like to feel the ground, or whatever all these things are that people have opinions about in cars. I feel like it's very similar. So
all right, so okay, good rant. Marques Spatz is right that Betaflight tracks the set point better than KISS and FetTech. But you just need to talk to your therapist about how annoyed you are that so many people like KISS and FetTech, despite the fact that they are objectively worse. It's not, I mean, how many? He got 2,000 views on this video. Like if he could come, I feel like we've almost done hitting this point. Like the work he does comparing them is valuable work, and I want him to keep doing it. But it's so clear he goes into it with this big chip on his shoulder, and it's just not a good look. And it's not enjoyable content to consume, to feel like you've got it out for them. But they're fans of the flight controller.
It just feels a lot like somebody like I don't know. Like we said, testing cars and then saying like, I don't know why you idiots are using these cars because these are the right cars and these are the cars you should buy. So well, why you might be happy with your other cars, but that's what you think and you're wrong. Yeah, you know what I mean.
All right, alrighty. That is going to bring us to the end of the rant.
Yes,
and the end of the news. Thank you so much for coming out, guys. Thank you, Blunty, for being here. We'll be back next week, of course, with more news.
Yeah, don't forget to email news@fpvknowitall with your submissions. That is always helpful. It's always down at the bottom in case you forget it. I have a surprising number of people ask me what the email address is, and it's always there for you just in case you need it.
No one reads that stuff. They they don't even see it.
Yeah, we need to start changing it up and add some secrets in there. So
it was moving, and people said that was too distracting. So I don't know. Anyway, email news@fpvknowitall.com.
Don't forget to give a like to this. If you do, that's always helpful. Subscribe to this channel if somehow you aren't subscribed, and hit that bell so you get the notifications when we go live with this or anything else, or when Joshua makes a new video. And we do appreciate you guys being here with us as always.
I got to read those super chats though before we go.
Yes.
JF, thank you for $5 Australian. I still love the iFlight backpack. It's still my daily. You should totally get one. Grim FPV, thank you for 50 Norwegian kroner. Good evening, JB and Blunty, and the chat. And Bags FPV, thanks for $5 in the super chat. Really appreciate all your support. That's going to do it for the news. We'll see you next week at 6 p.m. and throughout the week. Happy flying, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.